Shadow is on the floor, covered in several documents he was probably reading until he fell asleep. He jumps away from the sound of Vulture's smartphone going off. The notification is from headquarters. He got surprised when he realizes what it is all about because he wasn't informed about it previously. By the way, the intelligence team is composed of just Shadow. Yes, I'm positive. Moving on. The scene then moves to someone riding a motorcycle on the freeway. He appears to be acquainted with Shihyeon from before he went to Korea, and it seems like he's on his way to meet him. Now we go to where Shihyeon and Hajun are. Shihyeon had just bought coffee for them and handed Hajun his as he asked where he parked his car. Hajun informs him dutifully before he takes a sip of the coffee, which, to his surprise, suited his taste well. Shihyeon quickly says that he just ordered what he ordered for himself. Although, of course, that wasn't the case. After all, he already knew what Hajun's favorite coffee was, a double shot of cappuccino with more cinnamon and less foam. Mine's black with 3 sugar and a shot of cream. I'm just saying cause no one's asking. Anyway, Shihyeon and Hajun continued their walk in the park. As they did, Shihyeon noticed that there were a lot of people, probably because it was the weekend and the weather had cooled down. Aiming to continue the small talk, Shihyeon asks Hajun if he would often go jogging here since it's close to his house. Hajun responds sometimes, and that's the end of the talk as silence settles between them again. However, it seems that only Shihyeon is bothered by it. Shortly after, Hajun asks Shihyeon what he usually does after work. Unlike him, who's often busy and comes home late, Shihyeon should have more free time. Hajun is curious as to what he does in those times. Well, as we all guessed, Shihyeon is doing normal stuff like watching TV while relaxing at home, aka checking Hajun's location on the GPS tracker and listening through the bug he attached to Hajun. He also sometimes meets with a friend and has dinner, as when he had to do his periodic reports with Shadow. He also dutifully added a lie about looking for a house to move to, although finding a good one is difficult. Hajun responds that there's no need to hurry to move out and stay at his place comfortably. Hajun then suddenly points out that they know nothing about each other. Then again, that applies to Hajun. After all, Shihyeon probably already knew everything there was to know about Hajun. From his undergrad thesis topic to his preferred brand of suit to his favorite coffee, cigarettes, wine, and even genres of music. I just realized that spy agents are basically obsessive stalkers. The only difference is that they're viewed as cool. Anyway, Shihyeon tells Hajun that he already knows some things about Shihyeon and can take time to figure out the rest. As for Shihyeon, at least now he knows what kind of coffee Hajun likes. Touched, Hajun is just about to ask Shihyeon something when he suddenly pushes him. Apparently, a kid playing with his scooter is coming through, and he almost hits them. Whoa, that's an SS rank agent for you. Moving on, the said kid managed to fall by himself. And then, what appears to be his mother comes running towards them just as Shihyeon is helping him from the fall. The lady quickly tells the kid to apologize. Shihyeon is just saying that there's no need for fuss. After all, the poor kid was the one who fell in the end, and nobody got hurt. Well, except for the kid, who's already in tears and willingly gave Shihyeon his cotton candy as an apology. The kid then quickly dashes away in his scooter again, and his mother has no choice but to run after him again. Shihyeon is dumbfounded by the token of apology he received, and Hajun is greatly amused by how it was given. Anyway, Shihyeon feels bad about throwing it away, so he tries it himself. Seeing Shihyeon take a bite out of it made Hajun remember a kid he had handed cotton candy before to stop him from crying. Suddenly, Hajun invaded Shihyeon's personal space, startling Shihyeon and making him wonder if it was because Hajun wants the cotton candy for himself. Anyway, it's a spur of the moment, and Hajun says that Shihyeon feels like he resembles someone Hajun used to know. As Hajun is explaining that, Shihyeon notices a guy riding a motorcycle coming in their direction. At first, Shihyeon thinks the guy seemed to be driving too fast in a pedestrian area. But then he noticed how the driver was about to take out a gun from under his jacket. And so, once again, Shihyeon warns Hajun to duck. Just as the rider went bang bang, Shihyeon pulled Hajun out of the way, and using his own toy conveniently tucked under his sleeve, Shihyeon also went bang bang and hit the motorcycle's tire. The rider crashed, but he's quick to get back up, only for Shihyeon to kick him in the head. All of these Hajun witness, of course. Safe to say, he's really surprised at Shihyeon's actions, and when Shihyeon realizes this, he suddenly exclaims to distract Hajun, only to hit him to the point where Hajun lost consciousness. Tisk, tisk. And yet he complains that Hajun is intense. Shihyeon felt bad at what he did, of course, but not having Hajun as a witness is more convenient. And so, they made their way to where Hajun parked his car. Good thing he asked about it beforehand. Shihyeon is quick to drive away, only for the car window on his side to shatter from another bang-bang. Suddenly, it's a car chase between Hajun's white car and two unidentified black ones. And then, another guy on a motorcycle entered the scene. Just as Shihyeon was starting to lose hope, the guy of a motorcycle used his own bang-bang, sending the driver from one of the black cars to the afterlife. The rider grins at Shihyeon, who he somehow recognizes, although there's no time to contemplate. Shihyeon had a confrontation with the other black car. He quickly and expertly used his bang-bang first and then maneuvered to make the car crash. Shihyeon then leaves the car just as the motorcycle rider arrives. Shihyeon is quick to point his bang-bang towards the rider, warning him about coming closer. The rider, however, still confidently walks towards Shihyeon, disappointed that Shihyeon doesn't recognize who he is, but Shihyeon did know who the rider was. It's just that he's on guard against him because he doesn't know why he's there. The rider then took off his helmet and used it to hit the driver of the car that Shihyeon had just crashed, although obviously, he didn't manage to subdue completely, ultimately saving Shihyeon once again. The rider then tells Shihyeon how he's more disappointed in him for that. After all, no matter what happens, he'll never be Shihyeon's enemy. Wait, is this the second male lead? Is he? Hajun has a nice body and a big thing, but this guy is smoking hot. Better start building your fences up, Hajun. Anyway, obviously, Shihyeon wasn't informed of this guy's arrival, which, although he had saved him and his target, isn't really welcome. By the looks of it, Shihyeon finds this hottie troublesome, who seems to be interested in him, even though he's a fellow agent from Vulture, codename Uno. Agent Uno dangerously closes in on Shihyeon, too close for Shihyeon's comfort that he threatens him to get away or the bang-bang in his hand might go off. But then Uno nonchalantly tells Shihyeon to lower his voice and put his bang-bang inside his jacket. And of course, to not forget the safety of avoiding accidents. After all, Shihyeon doesn't want to have to explain another thing to his darling target, aka Hajun, who just regained consciousness and is now slowly getting out of the car. Realizing that, Shihyeon immediately runs towards Hajun and asks him if he's okay, blaming the fact that they had been beaten around a lot earlier and that's why Hajun woke up earlier than expected. Anyway, Shihyeon is quick to make up a story about what happened, saying that Hajun was hit on the back of the head by a robber who was working with the delivery guy. Expertly twisted white lie. I like it. That aside, Shihyeon added that they somehow managed to get through and that he was just about to send Hajun to the hospital, but then they got into an accident. Hajun, however, didn't seem concerned about what happened to him. Instead, he asks Shihyeon if he's okay, seeing as there's blood on his face, which he apparently got from the shattered window glass earlier. Well, it is just a scratch, and he didn't notice because of all the action. Shihyeon brushes it off and claims that he's not hurt anywhere. Only after he said that Hajun asks about Uno, who is patiently staying behind them. Shihyeon explains that the guy is just a passerby who helped him after he saw the accident, and that he'll be a witness for the insurance company regarding what happened to the car. That's why he was talking to him, to get his contact info. And with that, Shihyeon hurries Hajun to go back to the car so that they can go to the hospital. Later that night, Hajun is peacefully sleeping on his bed as Shihyeon watches over him. At first, he was thinking about Hajun's nonchalant reaction to his car. Although Shihyeon is just really glad that they somehow managed to get through all that. And then Shihyeon remembers the concern that Hajun showed for him. Even though it was Hajun who collapsed after he was punched, not long after, perhaps also feeling guilty about what he did, Shihyeon leaves the room, not knowing that Hajun was, in fact, awake the whole time. The next morning, as Shihyeon is doing his chores, he remembers the conversation he had with Uno over the phone. He was telling Shihyeon how he's working on something at the moment, and although it's a bit complicated to explain, he'll eventually let Shihyeon know about it later. Therefore, Shihyeon should continue keeping an eye on Hajun. The hottie probably didn't really mean anything by it, but Shihyeon is upset that Umno seemed to be bossing him around. More so since Hajun is his target in the first place. Anyway, Shihyeon just had another reason to complain about with the HQ. On another note, there are also those armed guys who attacked them. Perhaps they could also be working together with those who were at the bar. Then again, the ones from last weekend had bang-bangs with them. Plus, what would they even gain if Hajun dies? Anyway, it seems like the Tigress had been watching Shihyeon since earlier, and she's not really pleased with how careless Shihyeon had been. She then sends Shihyeon to take out the trash bags. As Shihyeon did as he was told, he reflected on how the manager is sometimes even scarier than the Vulture director. He knows that he should have been focusing on his work right now, but with what happened over the weekend, he can't focus. Suddenly, someone grabs one of the trash bags Shihyeon is carrying, and just as he is about to say thanks, he realizes who it is. The said someone explains that he would have wanted to bring it all the way down, but unfortunately, he has a class, and he feels bad for his students if he's late for his first lecture, and therefore can only help Shihyeon until the elevator door. Anyway, he turned out to be Uno. He compliments Shihyeon on how cute he looks with his uniform, after which he tells him not to go anywhere and wait for him after his lessons are over. Safe to say, Shihyeon is dumbfounded. Meanwhile, on Uno's side, he enters the classroom and quiets down the noisy students. As he made his way over the podium, he explains to the students how he's taking over for their original lecturer, who won't be able to continue his job due to some personal matters. He also explains to them how he had already looked over the curriculum and the students list, as well as uploaded his personal information on the school website. He introduces himself as Adam Kiley from Edinburgh, and he'll be the one teaching them for this semester. A student is tapping away on his laptop. Hajun is in front of him and is giving him points to improve on in his paper. Just as Hajun is about to take off his glasses, Yoon-jae enters the room and tells Hajun to take a break since he brought coffee. Later on, the two of them went to the smoking area of the building. Yoon-jae asks Hajun what happened to his neck, to which Hajun brushes it off as a simple bruise that he got after bumping into something. Ugh. Hajun-si, why are you covering for Shihyeon? You're indeed very suspicious yourself. We're watching you. Anyway, Yoon-jae asks Hajun about his presentation, to which Hajun explains that he'll just do some minor modifications on the PowerPoint. Yoon-jae then tells him that he should take a break after he's done with it since this year is important to him. Hajun nonchalantly responds. After all that, Yoon-jae tells his friend to call his mother. She had been calling him a few times, asking if something was going on with him. Again, Hajun nonchalantly affirms and also apologizes for bothering him, not that Yoon-jae minds. And then Yoon-jae asks for a lighter from Hajun, and while Hajun gives it to him, he glimpses into Yoon-jae's eyes and suddenly has a solemn expression on his face. Hajun-si, what is the meaning of this? I swear you better straighten up or we'll really be having second male lead syndrome before we even reach chapter 50. Oblivious, Mr. Glasses didn't notice anything at all. He then starts talking about how he will have a meal with a new native speaker later, and that all the professors who have time should come join them after work. Hajun asks about the previous professor, but Yoon-jae doesn't know anything either. He wondered what had happened himself since there didn't seem to be anything wrong with him the previous week, a response that even Hajun became suspicious about. Meanwhile, outside Yuno's classroom, Shihyeon was trying to be inconspicuous as he waits for Yuno to come out, as he was instructed. The students were making their way out of the classroom, so obviously the class was done, and Shihyeon is getting impatient that Mr. Hadi is still nowhere to be found. Once Shihyeon finally sees Uno leave the room with a couple of students, he stands up to follow him, only to get startled when he saw Uno and Hajun having a confrontation. The students with Uno scurries away as he addresses Hajun as his colleague. In response, Hajun asks him if he's the new native speaker professor. One of nods and comments on why it seems like Hajun is not happy to see him, even though Hajun should be thankful to him after he helped them with the accident the other day. Uno even brings up Shihyeon, but Hajun doesn't say anything. Instead, Hajun comments about how Uno is inappropriately dressed for the school. Uno laughs it off and just comments about how Hajun, being an associate professor, made him have different tastes from someone like Uno, who is younger than him. Hajun might just be unreasonably nitpicking on Uno. After all, he did see Uno have his arm around Shihyeon's waist over the weekend. Before they could continue their talk about Shihyeon, though, Shihyeon appears and accidentally hits Uno with a dustpan, only to babble some excuse as he hurriedly drags him away. Although dumbfounded at first, Hajun had an annoyed expression as he sees the other two leave. This dude dares to get angry when he's having unrequited feelings for his friend. Two can play in this game, Mr. Hajun, sir. Moving on. Shihyeon brings Uno somewhere isolated and starts interrogating him about why Uno is messing with his target, saying that, as far as Shihyeon is concerned, Uno should be working in South America. Uno explains that his assignment there is still ongoing, and he'll tell Shihyeon about it later on. That aside, Uno explains that after Shihyeon left last weekend, he tied up the guy who fainted after being hit by Uno's helmet. He thought he had just fainted and was waiting for him to wake up so he could interrogate him. Unfortunately, he never woke up. He died after he chewed the poison that was inside his mouth, although Uno couldn't tell if it was an accident or something else, since there were a bunch of other devices planted in his mouth that are operated remotely. That said, Uno once again points out that Shihyeon should treat him better. After all, he's there to help him. Shihyeon still denies it. He didn't even ask for support in the first place. And even if he did, he won't be asking for Uno. But then Uno points at Shadow, who had been behind Shihyeon all this time, and who is now just a shadow of his normal self after he had to do overtime taking care of the shootout and car chase that they were involved in over the weekend. Anyway, now that the three of them have gathered, Uno starts to preside over the meeting that he arranged. First of all, he explains how he was dutifully doing his job when an unexpected name suddenly came up from his client, and that name being Professor Park Chi-yeol-ho, the one who had gone missing months ago and is Park Ha-jun's father. Uno is narrating about his mission of tracking the human trafficking cartel based in Bolivia. Due to the effects of the recessions, some cartels have become more active, and the local mafia groups have become alert against each other. As such, Uno would often attend their exclusive gatherings to get close to their organization. He became proactive in becoming fast friends with a lady who works as their accountant, aka probably doing the waka-waka with her, as what Shihyeon and Shadow also guessed. Uno explains that Park Chi-yeol-ho is the name that he came across when he was looking through their internal documents. There was no mistaking it since his characteristics, as well as the time when he disappeared, all lined up. In fact, his last dealing with the cartel was last week, after which he suddenly went missing. At this point, Shihyeon concluded that the blueprint they were looking for are probably already sold off to the cartels. Therefore, there's no more point for them to stay there. After all, if it's in South American cartels, then there's no telling where it could be by now. Fortunately, there seems to be more of Uno's story. Uno further explains that Park Sr. isn't simply a loose end. After all, he is actually being supplied with people for his use. Anyway, seeing as there's no trace of him left, then, more probably than not, he had used a professional to erase his tracks, making things difficult for them. Although they did manage to get hold of some of his stuff from the hotel, he was last in. Uno doesn't think they'll have some use for them, but he still brought it regardless. That said, since Uno is also tracking Park Sr., and it's a good chance for him to team up with Shihyeon, he decided to show up. And it was great timing that he did when he did, since Shihyeon was really in danger. Shihyeon, however, stubbornly claims that he didn't really need his help. He was just caught off guard at that time, and he would have been able to handle it himself. Ignoring Shihyeon's self-preserving protests, Uno points out how it's Shihyeon's mission to seduce Hajun, a fact that should never have been shared with him. But of course, Shadow just had to do that, earning him a death glare from Shihyeon. Anyway, Uno asks Shihyeon how his mission has been going so far, since it's really hard for him to believe that Shihyeon could actually act all lovey-dovey with someone like Hajun. Well, Shihyeon tries to brush it off, saying that he's doing just fine by himself. The key word is trying. We all know how it has been between Hajun and Shihyeon so far. And unfortunately, despite his bragging, Shihyeon isn't fooling his fellow agents. That said, Uno claims that he can help Shihyeon with some pointers. Uno walks closer to Shihyeon and touches his chin. He points out how Shihyeon had always been stiff, even before he met Hajun, and if that proves to deter his progress, he doesn't know how to seduce someone. Uno can help him with that. After all, Luno is the type of guy who doesn't really care whether it's a man or a woman. In just an hour, he'll be able to extract the information he wants from them. There's no way Shihyeon would take him up on his offer, of course, and even starts to threaten Uno for being too close and touchy-feely with him. Shadow is just about to tease them, but then he starts feeling someone's glares pointing at his back. It was coming from the tigress who had come to get Shihyeon. After all, she only sent him to throw the trash, and yet, an hour later, she finds him chatting away. Anyway, now that it's just Uno and Shadow left, Shadow urges Uno to fess up. After all, he used an untraceable phone when he contacted Shadow, sending Shadow a message that he's headed to where they are and that he shouldn't let the headquarters know. Therefore, it's obvious that there's a big reason behind that action. Then again, it's not like Uno plans to hide it. He explains that the headquarters don't know that he's there since he hasn't reported back to them about his mission. This, in turn, made Shadow wonder how Uno got his current disguise then if the headquarters didn't help. Uno proudly admits that he got creative. Apparently, the professor before him is, in fact, a close uncle of one of his old Waka Waka buddies. That said, Uno warns that Shadow shouldn't report all of his findings to the headquarters either. After all, he feels like the headquarters are also hiding some things from them. And since the director is being shown here, then perhaps the culprit is also him. Later, Shihyeon gave a deep sigh as he took a break while cleaning the windows. His body had been aching after all the tension he'd been under these days. After all, danger might still be lurking around Hajun, so he had to keep watch. Uno did say he'd look after him at school, but he can't really trust him. Just as he talked himself to get a little break since Hajun was doing a lecture, Shihyeon heard the sound of a fight. Cautiously, Shihyeon takes out his hidden slasher and slowly heads for the direction of the sounds, only to be surprised that it's just Mr. Glasses playing on his phone and who is getting frustrated. Only after he loses again does he notice Shihyeon, who tries to compose himself after feeling stupid for jumping to conclusions. Typical Shihyeon. Heh. Anyway, they gave short introductions and exchanged pleasantries. Shihyeon then sits near the professor as he asks what he's doing. Yoonjae explains that he's doing the dailies for his games. He doesn't have his own lab, so he has to stay there since that place has the best Wi-Fi. Now that he mentions it, I still haven't done my own dailies. Moving on. Shihyeon suddenly remembers Hajun saying how a close friend of his liked arcades. Shihyeon then asks Yoonjae if he likes retro games like the one in the arcades. The professor admits to it, saying that he enjoys all sorts of games, and that Hajun and he used to go to arcades together when they were younger. This made Shihyeon realize that not only did Hajun and Yoonjae go to the same high school, but they were closer than he had first thought, and to think he hadn't been back in the country for too long. Shihyeon then remembers what Uno said about him being stiff and hurting his pride. And so, just like someone asking the bestie of the person they like for some intel, Shihyeon made his move. At first, he leads the conversation by asking if Yoonjae is indeed close with Hajun. Yoonjae confirms and admits that not only were they friends since high school, but they also know each other's family well. I'm going for it. Then, Shihyeon asks Yoonjae what type of people Hajun likes. When Yoonjae asks why he wants to know, Shihyeon makes an excuse that the old ladies he works with would often talk about him, of how he fits their ideal type and would like to introduce someone to him. Four Eyes then tells Shihyeon that he probably has an idea of his ideal type. He said that he'd tell him if he can help Yoonjae beat the level of the game he's playing and handed him his phone. Shihyeon suddenly springs up from his seat as he finally beats the game, surprising even Yoonjae himself. The Four Eyes compliments him while sortingly undermining his capabilities at the same time. Anyway, Yoonjae is saying that he can't just sell out a friend. Seems like he really didn't plan on telling Shihyeon anything and is only making the games an excuse. But a deal is a deal. And so, Yoonjae starts to try thinking about it seriously and admits that he's not sure either. From his observation, Hajun is not the type to madly fall in love with someone, and that the longest relationship he's ever been in is around a week. And here we are, who's never been in a relationship even for a day. Shihyeon is dumbfounded, especially after Hajun admits that he's not certain either if Hajun is really dating that girl. Then, after all, just when he starts thinking that Hajun is dating someone, then the day after that, he'll be alone again. In conclusion, Yoonjae thinks that perhaps Hajun has never really dated anyone before. Yoonjae apologizes for not being able to provide much information, but Shihyeon dismisses it, After all, he was really just curious. Sort of. As Shihyeon turns to leave, he comments on how Yoonjae has known a lot of things about Hajun since they were friends in high school. But then Yoonjae says that although they went to high school together, that's not when they first met. No way. Is it an unrequited love since they were kids? Hajun-si, this is already your fourth strike. Second male lead syndrome is seriously commencing. Anyway, just as Shihyeon is leaving, he receives a message from Hajun asking him if he wants to go home together after work. Later in the evening, as the two of them headed home, Shihyeon kept on looking at Hajun as if he knew something funny. That is, Hajun being an amateur when it comes to dating, at least as far as Shihyeon is told. Turns out it isn't something big that Hajun would be upset over and try to hide. Hajun asks if Shihyeon's looking at him like that because of what he and Yoonjae talked about. Turns out Yoonjae came to him earlier, explained what happened, and even apologized. Oi, at least Mr. Glasses is a good and loyal friend. Now that it's out in the open, Shihyeon comments how he can't believe that Hajun is a newbie when it comes to dating. Although that's not really it. Hajun admits that although he's never been in a serious relationship before, he's been around. A lot, unlike a certain someone. Then again, dating and being proactive are completely different. To make things clear between them, he's technically been in a relationship, although not for too long, hinting that he had been in a friends with benefits thing with someone. Although, of course, it's true that Shihyeon really is his first relationship with a man. That's a plus in our books, Shihyeon-si. Let's not lose our confidence, yeah. The next day, Shihyeon is still very bothered by what Hajun had told him the night before. That's even at work. He's been thinking about it. Well, how can he not? Hajun doesn't discriminate against gender. He has lived all his life without being in a relationship. As do I. He doesn't mind doing the rodeo with someone he doesn't love. Much like Uno, I guess. Anyway, of course, I will get self-conscious and panic. But for the sake of his mission, this sort of thing can't continue. And so, he contacts Shadow and requested for certain items. Later that day, back at their house, Shihyeon is looking over a bunch of naughty stuff that was sent to him. They range from normal toys to underwear that doesn't look like it's used for men and even a holster that barely has any fabric. It also includes a flash drive especially prepared for Shihyeon's reference, which, after he went through, made Shihyeon lose a bit of his sanity. Shihyeon would rather have something normal, though, and so he went through Hajun's closet to look for something he can wear. He really had to do something for the Operation Honey Trap to progress. Remembering those times when they were doing the rodeo, Shihyeon reflects on the fact that Hajun's sword is, in fact, a few inches bigger than his. Moving on. After choosing the most normal underwear and shirt he could find, Shihyeon picks up the handcuffs from the items and wonders why it's there. Although, from what Shadow told him, it's something that those in the teaching profession likes. Isn't it used for teaching in that sort of pla? Okay, I'm not going to continue that word, just get flagged later. Moving on. Shihyeon tries the cuffs. It's pretty sturdy, although it's made up of soft material, so it doesn't really hurt. He's just about to take it off, but then the key snaps. The fricker broke, probably because Shadow got it from some thrift store. Panicking, Shihyeon tries to look for something to get it off him before Hajun comes home. I mean, you're a grown man and an SS-rank spy agent. Can't you at least break the chain? But hey, it's not like I don't look forward to where this is headed. Heh. Much later in the evening, Hajun heard a commotion as he enters the house. He notices his bedroom door open and asks Shihyeon why he's there. Instead of an answer, Hajun got something thrown in his face, followed by Shihyeon warning him not to come in. At first, Hajun is a bit annoyed for having something suddenly thrown in his face, but then he has a double take when he realizes what that something actually is. Now really curious about what's going on, he forces his way inside the room and sees Shihyeon on the floor with only a shirt on. And of course, let's not forget the cuffs. Shihyeon covers his face with his hands, super embarrassed that he can't even look Hajun in the eyes. He blames the fact that he couldn't break out of the cuffs that he couldn't put on his pants. Some of us would have resolved this issue easily, even though we're not spy agents. But then we won't be entertained anymore. Hajun easily lifts Shihyeon on his shoulder without saying anything and drops him on the bed. Hajun then confronts Shihyeon on the fact that he's now wearing his shirt and didn't go home with him because he's preparing something like this for Hajun. Shihyeon tries to deny it, But then Hajun looks over Shihyeon's naughty box and picks up a black toy sword. Shihyeon is quick to demand it back, saying that it's his, so he should be the one to use it, seeing as there's no turning back anymore. Shihyeon starts playing with a toy sword, all the while trying to get Hajun in the mood. He's still very much clumsy at it and feels awkward doing it on his own. But then suddenly, Hajun grabs his hand and points out how Shihyeon's black hole needs to be lubricated before the toy can be used there. Without another word, Hajun spreads Shihyeon's buns and starts servicing his black hole. After this, Hajun asks him if he still wants to play with his toy. Blushing furiously, Shihyeon admits that he'd rather have Hajun's sword instead. And, of course, Hajun willingly obliges. Soon after, Hajun turns Shihyeon over to have better access to his buns, after which the buns devour the swords. Or is it the other way around? Either way, it was uncomfortable for the both of them at first despite the preparations. That is until Hajun once again reached Shihyeon's sweet spot, which, unfortunately, our little Yuke still has no idea about. Seeing how Shihyeon is uncomfortable and tries to pull away, Hajun turns him over so he's lying on his back. Hajun then points out that even though Shihyeon wants to stop, his own sword is fighting hard to break free. Much to Shihyeon's embarrassment, although his sword is indeed hurting because of the underwear he's still wearing. And so, Hajun rips it off, which in turn also snaps off Shihyeon's holster, as Shihyeon points it out, as if maybe making it into an excuse for them to stop. Hajun tells him that he'll buy some more for him if he really likes it. Point is, there's no stopping Hajun now whatever happens. Later that evening, Shihyeon is sleeping peacefully, and Hajun once again watches him. He then asks the sleeping Shihyeon why he continues to lie to him. Well, so he really does know. Visiting Hajun's memory lane, we see some dude angrily pushing Hajun off him, pissed that his sword isn't working and accuses him of being impotent even though Hajun is quite a looker. He's not though. The problem is you. Anyway, as Hajun lays on the bed while he smokes, he reflects on the fact that he can't go all the way with guys. He has no problems with the preparations, but when it's finally time to get some action, the stick goes limp. He then notices his phone vibrate and realizes that there are already 32 unread messages from his mother. All of it points out to Hajun rejecting yet another girl his mother had probably arranged for him. He was looking at the messages, that is until Yoonjae suddenly calls him to ask some questions regarding his lectures. And so, for lack of better things to do, Hajun helps out for some distraction. And then we move to that time when Shihyeon wakes up and tells Hajun they did it the previous night. At that time, Hajun already knew that Shihyeon was lying. Although it's true that he sort of remembers what happened, there's no way he won't know if he used his sword with someone. Even if he's drunk. Plus, it's his first time, so there's no way he won't remember it. But Hajun chose to go along with it. After all, it's not like it's every day that someone tries to cling on him for their own selfish reasons. He's already used to having people approach him to get near his father. Well, he's not wrong. Although this kind of tactic that Shihyeon is doing is at first, so he'll leave him be for now until Shihyeon reveals his intentions himself. Hajun intends to catch Shihyeon on the act and then interrogate him. But the more time they spend together, the more Hajun sees how even though it was Shihyeon who approached him, he acts nervous and stiff all the time as if it's his first time dating a guy. I see. So the SS rank agent's clumsiness came in handy without him intending to. Anyway, Hajun tries a different approach and decided to embrace him instead. Perhaps it'll be too much for Shihyeon, that he'll push Hajun away and reveal the truth. After all, he's definitely hiding something. Although it happened on impulse, and he immediately knew that it was Shihyeon's first time. To Hajun's surprise, his sword is actually up and functional, something that's never happened to him before, to the point that Hajun thought perhaps it was because he enjoyed seeing Shihyeon patiently enduring the pain he's obviously under. That again, it still doesn't make sense. Shihyeon is so different from that person, whoever that is, although I really hope it's not Four Eyes. Moving on, we turn to that night when Hajun had dinner with Yoonjae. Back then, Hajun fully intended to send Shihyeon away. Although it's too bad because Shihyeon is someone who gets him in the mood all the way. Hajun is positive he'll find someone like him somewhere. That again, there wasn't really a need for him to look, was there? Well, You freakishly handsome and attractive human being who doesn't need to hunt because he just attracts the praise. Anyway, as Hajun got home that night, he intended to embrace Shihyeon for the last time. Or at least that was the plan. But then, Shihyeon noticed and asked what was bothering Hajun, when even Hajun's best friend didn't. And so, Hajun is starting to have second thoughts. After all, if Shihyeon really wanted something from him, then he should have acquired it by now. And there was also that time over the weekend when he lost consciousness. It was definitely suspicious. Then again, there wasn't anything out of the ordinary when he did his own investigations. Although it's also true that he has biases against Uno, which is right on point, as we all might have guessed. And then when Hajun thought he's finally going to get Shihyeon on the act, he sees him in such a compromising situation. Sort of. It's true that Hajun did find it ridiculous at first, but since Shihyeon did give an effort for his sake, then there's no reason for him to reject. And so the second thoughts that Hajun was having turned to him, trusting Shihyeon all the way, believing that Shihyeon genuinely wants to be with him. The next morning, Hajun serves Shihyeon yet another plate of professional-looking breakfast. As they were about to start their meal, Hajun tells Shihyeon that he won't be home from Thursday to Saturday. He explains that he's going to attend a conference at Daejeon. And although it'll be over by Friday night, there's going to be a reception party afterwards, so he won't be able to come home until Saturday, since he'll rest in a hotel Friday night and will only be heading home the next morning. While Shihyeon savors the pancake that store-bought pancake mixes can't make, Hajun is explaining his schedule during the first 2 days of the conference, and especially mentioning the exact time when he'll be free. Shihyeon just nonchalantly replies since he's still very much enjoying his pancakes, even though it seems like Hajun is expecting some reaction from him. And when Hajun doesn't get it, he urges Shihyeon to hurry up so they won't be late for work. But Shihyeon did notice how Hajun especially spells out to him his schedule. He even made a wild guess that it was so he knows when he can call Hajun. But, of course, there's no way that really is the case. Moving on to the day of the conference, Shihyeon is registering with yet another disguise. A Professor Jin Ho Kong from the Korean University of Western Culture Laboratory. He's in tears out of happiness for finally getting a proper disguise that a spy should have. Unlike the one he's been having so far, where a tigress is always on the lookout for his mistakes. Anyway, Shihyeon is there to make sure no danger would come to Hajun. After all, he'll be an easy target with his name publicly available like this, not to mention appearing in a specific place. Although Hajun will probably spend most of his time with the other professors and not wander around, he's already been attacked out in public, so there's no harm in trying to be vigilant still. Just then, Shihyeon was notified in his GPS watch that the faculty from their university have already arrived, since it's going to be a problem if someone notices him. Shihyeon thinks it's better to avoid them for now and follow them from a distance later on, and while he's at it, he should familiarize himself with the building layout. Meanwhile, a male professor from the same university is scolding and criticizing a student for shallow reasons. Another female professor is just saying that this sort of thing happens every year to that certain professor. The said female professor was talking to Hajun, but turns out he's distracted as he intently looks at his phone. When the professor notices this, she asks Hajun if he finally got a girlfriend, and that's why he's been looking at his phone. Hajun didn't give any comment and just apologized. The professor really didn't mind and just told Hajun that they should start heading inside and calm down the cranky professor while they're at it before he causes trouble. Just as Hajun was about to follow the professor, he twitched from the pain in his back caused by Shihyeon's fingers previously when they were doing it. Remembering how Shihyeon had looked back then, Hajun couldn't help but blush. Back to where Shihyeon is, he's just walking around the building, familiarizing himself with the rooms and the events that will take place in them later. Then suddenly, Shihyeon notices someone is following him. And so, he turns a corner to try and confront whoever they are. Shihyeon just took out his gun, but before he could do anything else, the person who's following him unarms him. Shihyeon is quick to try to make them lose their balance, but they still evade that. To make matters worse, Shihyeon now found himself against the wall. Something resembling a bang-bang is then pointed at Shihyeon's temple. Shihyeon already braces himself for the inevitable, but then it never came. Turns out, it's just Uno in his attempt to try and flirt with Shihyeon again. Uno is being obnoxious by trying to compliment and, at the same time, make fun of Shihyeon for having been attacked like that. He's in the middle of his monologue when Shihyeon meet him in his stomach. It was so strong that Uno couldn't help but feel like his organs did somersaults inside him. Not that Shihyeon cares, telling him that he should just be thankful he didn't aim lower. Now, that would really hurt. Annoyed, Shihyeon asks what Uno is doing there, to which Uno replies that it's because he was invited. Shihyeon couldn't believe it at first. After all, Uno had only been a temporary lecturer for 2 weeks, but Uno insists that the headmaster really invited him. Although perhaps it was also due to his own influence, it seems that the real reason why Uno is there is due to someone who will make an appearance in the conference. A Professor Sung-Nam Lim from Dongju University's Department of Materials Science and Engineering, who will arrive tomorrow and present his research on the conference. Turns out, this professor is someone who worked with Hajun's father in the same research project, and making him his colleague. They have been working together for almost 12 years, so he's probably the second best option for someone the professor will rely on next to his son. The professor's presentation won't be until Saturday afternoon, which makes Shihyeon wonder why he would arrive a day early. Uno then hints that perhaps it's because the professor is going to meet someone in particular. Shihyeon remembers what Hajun said about traveling back home by Saturday morning, and following the train of thoughts that Uno is probably having, he concludes that the professor is going to meet with Hajun and deliver some parcel to him. Be that as it may, Shihyeon wonders why Uno's intel seems to be more credible than his, to which Uno points out that it's because Shihyeon spends most of his time sticking to Hajun. Also, Shihyeon ought to find an information broker himself instead of relying on just what the Vulture provides. The fact that Shihyeon managed to reach SS rank despite such crappy support is already something to brag about. As much as Shihyeon wants to admit that Uno is right, he still finds it unpleasant that it's coming from him of all people. That aside, Uno points out that Shihyeon should be glad he's there. That way, Shihyeon would need to expose himself just so he can keep an eye on Hajun. Looking at the identification card of Shihyeon's disguise, Uno comments how his real name is cuter. He then bids farewell and tells Shihyeon he'll call him later. The following day, Hajun's presentation just finished and he's talking to other professors. The female professor from before calls him over and compliments him on his presentation. She's saying how she loved his fresh view of his explanation of the sonnet sequence, and his presentation was easy to follow as well. Hajun dutifully and nonchalantly thanked her, which made her tease him for being so formal and unsmiling despite being praised. She's just telling him then how they should all meet up later in the reception party when she suddenly remembers that she forgot to bring the academic journals she was going to hand out. Hajun offers to get them for her since it might be heavy. She thanks him and gives him her keys to the car. Meanwhile, in the parking lot, Professor Lim arrives and answers a call from Professor Kim, who seems to be the one that he's about to meet. As the professor heads inside the building, it's revealed that Professor Kim is actually Shadow, who is now trying to stall time for Shihyeon. In fact, both Uno and Shihyeon were trying to look through the professor's stuff in his car, with Uno acting as the lookout. Shihyeon tries his best to look for something. After all, if the professor really does have something to hand over to Hajun, then he'll definitely bring it with him. Well, Shihyeon did eventually notice something, and just as he had put everything back to the professor's bag, Uno grabs Shihyeon out of the car and shoves him against the wall. They then heard footsteps indicating that someone is with them in the car park area. Uno moves closer to Shihyeon, intending to make it look like they're in the middle of doing something so that no one would come to bother them. Shihyeon quickly realizes what Uno wants to do, although he doesn't really think it'll work. Still, Uno insists, pointing out that the kiss and diversion might be a classic move, but it's a classic for a reason. Plus, there are a lot of people who do or want to do this stuff in shady areas like where they are. In fact, it looks like Uno himself is one of those people, seeing as he has ulterior motives for suggesting that tactic. And although Shihyeon does not share the same sentiments, he has no choice but to let Uno do it. Only to his annoyance, Uno starts to make it more intimate. To Shihyeon's surprise, however, the footsteps seem to get closer instead of further, and before they know it, Hajun appears. He grabs Uno away from Shihyeon and was surprised himself seeing Shihyeon there. In a third person's perspective, the situation really seemed like Uno is forcing himself to Shihyeon. And so, without warning, Hajun punches Uno in the face. Uno expertly blocks Hajun's second strike, although it did annoy him. Shihyeon is quick to notice how Uno intends to actually fight back, even though Hajun is a civilian. Before anything happens that everyone will eventually regret later, Shihyeon puts himself between these two hotties and exclaims that Uno didn't force himself on him. Not exactly a lie, but yeah, sure. Hajun was just about to throw his third strike and manages to barely stop himself from hitting Shihyeon. Shihyeon's declaration, of course, surprises Hajun just then. A student came from behind Hajun, claiming that Professor Cha had told him to come to help Hajun bring the journals back. Using that as a distraction, Shihyeon urges Hajun to go back, promising to give him a call when he's not busy anymore and to explain everything later. And so, Hajun left with the newcomer. When he asks Hajun about what happened, Hajun brushes him off. He remembers all those times he and Shihyeon had been intimate and suddenly got angry, thinking that it was all, in fact, an act. Like, dude, come on. You're the one who's just keeping him around to observe him in the first place. What are you acting all jealous now for? Meanwhile, back to where the agents were. Shihyeon is helping Uno with his wound, although he's not really being gentle about it. And when Uno complains, Shihyeon just tells him he should just be grateful since if it were him, he would have beaten him to death. After all, because of what Uno did, then Hajun is probably under a huge misunderstanding. Uno asks if Shihyeon would have preferred it if it weren't a misunderstanding at all. Again, Shihyeon doesn't really get what he meant by that. Aoi, Uno, my man. You're the only one who'd want it not to be a misunderstanding. Anyway, Uno brushes it off, and instead, he asks Shihyeon what he found in the professor's car. Shihyeon then says how he saw a brochure about the professor's company, which is the only one that's out of place. It could be that the professor intends to introduce the new company to the conference tomorrow. Shihyeon further explains that the brochure contains information regarding the production of the new material, which is based in South America. This coincides with the intel Uno provided about Professor Park recruiting people in South America. If those people are really building what's in the blueprint, then their representative might come to visit the country for the opening ceremony in November. Either a proxy will come, or Professor Park will come himself. In any case, it's Uno's job to gather more information about Professor Lim, since he'll most probably have something to do with all of these. As for Shihyeon, he has to deal with something more urgent himself, aka a jealous boyfriend who just sent him a message. Once inside Ha-jun's car, Shihyeon asks him why he contacted him sooner than he was expecting. Turns out it was because Ha-jun didn't go to the dinner party. I mean, who in their right mind would want to go to a party when there's more pressing matters to attend to? Anyway, Ha-jun suddenly asks Shihyeon if he's dating Uno. Shocked, Shihyeon immediately denies it, of course. And so begins the jealous boyfriend interrogation mode. Ha-jun asks Shihyeon what he's doing with Uno all the way in Daejeon. And didn't he go there with Uno in the first place? Shihyeon dutifully clarifies things, more like mixing white lies and the truth. Shihyeon explains that Uno called him all the way over there because he had something he wanted to say. He saw Uno for just a bit, and they did already know each other previously. Once again, Ha-jun makes an assumption on his own, thinking that Shihyeon is the type of person who can do it with just anybody, although he immediately reflects on the fact that that's just how he used to be. So it's not like he's in a position to criticize Shihyeon for it. At least he recognizes that fact. As for Shihyeon, he's confused about why Ha-jun would get so angry about it. And so he apologizes to Ha-jun for not telling him. Being more honest, he admits that he was actually surprised when he saw Uno there. And since he doesn't think it's something important that he needs to let Ha-jun know, he just didn't inform him. When someone does something they know they shouldn't, it's common practice to sell someone out, right? And that's just what Shihyeon did towards Uno. He admits to have met Uno a couple of times, which led to that scene Ha-jun saw. That beautifully crafted twisted truth. Anyway, Shihyeon insists that here really isn't anything between him and Uno, and that he had completely ended his relationship with him. Before Shihyeon could complete his well-crafted excuse, however, Ha-jun had already invaded his personal space. He then asks Shihyeon if he and Uno had been so close to the point that Shihyeon let Uno kiss him just like that. Ha-jun doesn't think so, either, and in his frustration, He suddenly kisses Shihyeon, and even bites him to the point that there was blood coming off Shihyeon's lip when he finally manages to shove Hajun off him. Upon seeing the blood, of course, Hajun had to pull away and immediately apologizes to Shihyeon. Suddenly, he asks Shihyeon if he's, in fact, chaining Shihyeon down. Hajun admits that he hates people who shy away from responsibilities and even more those who are obsessed with him. Reflecting on what has been happening between them so far, Shihyeon had always just let Hajun do whatever he wants. In fact, despite it being his idea, Hajun didn't really make their relationship official. Hajun is just saying that Shihyeon is only staying with him because he's afraid of hurting his feelings. Then there's no need to go that far. But Shihyeon is quick to deny it, that it's not even close. After all, Shihyeon wants to be with Hajun, whether it was because of his mission or because of something else is yet to be known. But the fact is that Shihyeon genuinely wants to remain by Hajun's side, and it's because Shihyeon himself wants to be with him. Touched, Hajun suddenly asks Shihyeon if he can kiss them, even though he had already done so without asking just moments ago. And so, the two of them started kissing. Shihyeon even goes to position himself in Hajun's lap. Hajun was promiscuous. He's someone who would do it with just anyone. That was the report that was given to Shihyeon. And yet, his gut tells him that Hajun is in fact so much simpler than that. And so, it was also because of this feeling that Shihyeon himself makes the declaration. Shihyeon tells Hajun that if he's really worried about their relationship not being official, then perhaps it's about time they change that and start dating each other for real. Shihyeon tells Hajun that he doesn't want dumb declarations like taking full responsibility and whatnot. He then starts listing off the things he wants to change in their current arrangements, just like how it's fine if Hajun wants to be with Shihyeon at all times, although he would still need time on his own, and that he also wants to take time to enjoy his breakfast since he could choke. When Hajun accidentally lets out a laugh, Shihyeon is quick to get mad. After all, it's not the first time that Hajun did it, but see, he isn't laughing because of Shihyeon's demands. He's laughing because, once again, Shihyeon says and does things that are always outside of his expectations, making Shihyeon the most unpredictable person he's ever met. Anyway, Hajun agrees with what Shihyeon wants to do, which is for the two of them to officially start dating each other. Seeing Hajun smile at him as he agrees to this suggestion, Shihyeon couldn't help but feel it's the most genuine smile that Hajun had ever let him see. It made his heart race, and to distract himself, he initiates another kiss, which Hajun responds to even though it surprised him at first. Hajun then starts to take it to the next level, although that's when Shihyeon draws the line. After all, there's no way they can do it then and there. But Hajun insists that it's alright since everyone is in the reception party and won't be coming to the car park for at least an hour. Plus, isn't the reason why Shihyeon himself got on Hajun's lap because he wants to do it too? Shihyeon eventually gives in, convincing himself that it's just because it's the best way to avoid being suspected by Hajun. And just like that, the two of them started doing the rodeo by the car. Hajun is already on the part of Shihyeon's buns when Shihyeon stops him and takes out a rubber from his wallet. This surprised Hajun, and he immediately thought Shihyeon was actually thinking about doing it with Uno, and that's why he had some rubbers prepared. But, of course, that's not really it. Shihyeon just made sure to get prepared since Hajun always forgets to bring one. But then the pouting Hajun takes the unopened rubber and tosses it away, insisting that he wants to do it inside Shihyeon, so much that his buns will be overflowing with his tartar sauce. He asks Shihyeon to let him do it like that and promises to help him clean later on. Shihyeon easily gives in, not at all feeling cringy about Hajun's detailed declaration. In fact, it looks like he welcomes it even. Anyway, not long after, they once again started doing the rodeo. They were doing so much action in such a cramped space, which is why it's no wonder that Shihyeon bumps his head on the roof of the car. And that's only when Hajun realizes that it was, in fact, a bad idea to do it in the car. Unless, of course, your car isn't crumped. Anyway, once the two of them exchanges their position and incline the seat for more comfort, they start once again. As they did it, Hajun claims inside his head how he had given Shihyeon a lot of chances to back out, and that just now was his last chance. Hajun declares to himself that there's no way he's going to let him go now. Ha, wait till you realize you're the real-life version of the couple from that movie you went to for your first date. Meanwhile, we see Professor Lim entering a building, and not far from him is Uno, obviously waiting for him. Uno is talking to someone on the phone, letting the person on the other line know how the other agent isn't aware of it. After all, it's better to focus on just one target, although there really isn't a point in this case. He was saying how he wants to end this mission as soon as possible, and that's why he's currently on site. That said, Uno reminds the other person about their mutual agreement, and that they shouldn't worry, since he'll make sure to meet the deadline. In other words, the auction. Whatever that is. Anyway, Uno curses as soon as he ended the call, owing to the fact that his cheek is now dripping with blood, and it was on the side where Shihyeon had treated earlier. Okay, this hottie is definitely up to something sus. That's not Professor Lim's arm you're holding there, isn't it, Mr. Uno, sir? But let's not dabble on it yet, and let's just focus on our now very much official Yukon scene back in the car park. So, they just finished the car rodeo and are now both decently dressed. Hajun asks Shihyeon if he has a place to stay for the night, which Shihyeon denies and lies that he was planning on taking the night bus, even though he's actually occupying the hotel room right above Hajun's. Anyway, Hajun offers to let Shihyeon stay with him, since they will have to wash Shihyeon. Plus, Hajun has plenty of clothes for Shihyeon to change into. Once they arrive at the hotel and Shihyeon is about to get off the car, he suddenly stops in his tracks. Hajun's tartar sauce is trickling down from his buns every time he moves. Hajun is quick to realize this, and so he walks over to Shihyeon's side and suddenly carries him princess style. Shihyeon tries to resist at first, but Hajun points out that it's not likely for them to meet anyone from the car park to the elevator. And since Hajun turned away the valet, then there's less likely someone will be loitering in the area. Therefore, Shihyeon should just quietly let Hajun assist him. After all, Shihyeon is obviously having a hard time walking. And whose fault was it? Anyway, seeing Shihyeon act docile like that, Hajun couldn't help but think that his little lover is cute. Later that evening, after the two of them have settled in for the night, sharing the same bed that could actually fit one more person, Shihyeon found himself unable to sleep as he recalls the declaration he said earlier about him wanting to stay by Hajun's side. Back then, he was only trying to think of what to say, but those words slipped out. In fact, it came so naturally that Shihyeon convinces himself it was because he's been so immersed in his disguise. The good thing is, it was super effective too. Suddenly, Hajun asks if he can't sleep as well. Shihyeon says yes and blames the unfamiliar bed. Although Hajun is quick to point out how Shihyeon had always been sound asleep when he's on Hajun's bed, to Shihyeon's defense, it was because he's completely exhausted. Well, more like Hajun completely exhausted him. After all, Hajun isn't the type to be satisfied with only doing it once. Changing the topic, Shihyeon asks Hajun what his presentation was about. Hajun explains that it won't be something that Shihyeon would be interested in, nor was it very practical in everyday life. But Shihyeon insists on hearing it. After all, if it's really boring, then it might just help him fall asleep. Safe to say the comment kinda hurt Hajun. Still, he starts talking about it. Hajun explains how it was mainly talking about an epic poem, and although it isn't really something that he personally likes, he still got good responses from the audience, especially after he went deeper into the shorter chapters, and so on and so forth. Shihyeon then asks Hajun what was the main point being analyzed, to which Hajun responds, looking at Shihyeon, that it was about the fleeting moment of falling in love at first sight. Hajun then tucks Shihyeon to bed and tells him that they can wake up late tomorrow morning, and that he'll wake him up when it's almost time to check out. Now it seems like Shihyeon's plan backfired, because now he really can't sleep at all, since his feelings are all over the place. The next day, Hajun is taking a swim while Shihyeon observes on the sidelines. As Shihyeon watches, he can't help but admire how good of a swimmer Hajun is. Although it's probably all because he swims 3 times a day and exercises often, even though he's really busy, which in turn makes Shihyeon wonder why Hajun is always busy anyway. Earlier in the morning, when Hajun was about to leave for a swim, Shihyeon forced himself to go with him even though all he wanted to do is get some more rest due to his aching back. That aside, Shihyeon wonders why Professor Lim hadn't approached Hajun yet when he should have had a lot of chances to do so by now. Well, he probably couldn't because of a certain someone. Anyway, now that Shihyeon thinks about it, it's not like the professor had ever been in contact with Hajun. Not even a single message was exchanged between them. He checked. However, it could also be that they had delayed their meeting for some reason. Then again, he could just ask, since the dude's been monitoring him this whole time. We have our doubts, but yeah, sure, let's go with that. And even though he really didn't want to ask him for help, the completion of his assignment takes precedence. After all, speaking of assignments, Shihyeon suddenly remembered the talk he and Hajun had had last night about his presentation, about love at first sight and whatnot. Shihyeon feels like he's being so immersed in his disguise that he's mistaking his real feelings for those of the fake ones. Meanwhile, Hajun is just about to get out of the pool when his goggles suddenly break, and he has to dive down to get it. But that wasn't what Shihyeon saw. And so he hurriedly moves towards the edge of the pool with a towel in hand. Before he can say or do anything, however, Hajun is back up and splashing water to Shihyeon himself. Just then, Shihyeon had a glimpse of Hajun's face, and suddenly, he remembers yet again Hajun's words about the moment you realize that you've fallen in love at first sight. Even though Shihyeon didn't say anything, somehow Hajun got it. And so, he just tells Shihyeon not to get too close to the lane since he might get wet, and that Shihyeon should use the towel he brought and cover his neck and chest, as well as wipe all the water dry. After apologizing for getting him wet, Hajun leaves Shihyeon to gather his own thoughts. Now that he's on his own, Shihyeon once again reflects on the conflicting feelings he's having, blaming it to him being so immersed in his role as Hajun's lover. Then again, deep down, he knows that it wasn't just because of that. Going back once again to the past, we see a young boy, who looks like Hajun, holding a ball and waiting for his dad. As he was trying to play with the ball, it suddenly hit a passing car, after which the ball bounces in a different direction. Young Hajun goes after the ball, which had rolled near a bench where another kid is sitting and sobbing. When Hajun walks in front of the kid, who has his head down on his arms without looking up, the kid shoos him away. And Hajun's immediate impression is that the kid is rude. Without saying anything, Hajun plops himself down on the same bench. The kid then fidgets as he tries to distance himself from the newcomer, his curiosity getting the best of him. Hajun asks Shihyeon what he's doing there or if he's lost. But still, the kid continues to be rude. When the said kid tries to shoo Hajun away again, he returns the favor by rudely telling the kid to mind his own business since the bench isn't his in the first place. Back to the present, and back to their regular lives. It was lunchtime and Shihyeon is just about to eat with his co-workers. Shihyeon is being so energetic despite having to have worked up a sweat from doing his morning chores. Shihyeon is particularly being chummy with the other lady, and even asks her to call him on his first name. In the tigress' eyes, however, Shihyeon is still a greenhorn. The tigress is being so critical and starts listing off the areas that Shihyeon needs to clean, to which he had actually already cleaned before sitting down for lunch, impressed, but won't really admit to it. The tigress then instructs Shihyeon to clean the auditorium himself after lunch. Suddenly, Shihyeon's phone vibrated. He goes outside the room to take the call. It was Hajun who wanted to eat together with Shihyeon since his lecture just finished. Shihyeon then explains that he just had shared lunch with the cleaning ladies. Hajun then wonders where Shihyeon got his lunch since he didn't even make one during breakfast. Shihyeon then responds that he just bought one from outside. Hajun then offers to make him a lunchbox, but Shihyeon declines. After all, Hajun already had to wake up early for work, and if he suddenly brings a lunchbox to work, then the cleaning ladies might gossip about it. Hajun says that it isn't a problem at all, although if it'll inconvenience Shihyeon in any way, then he won't insist. Can we just stop and admire how these two are so mature at times? They just know when to and when not to push things. Anyway, Hajun then asks Shihyeon if he's free this coming weekend, or if he has any plans on Saturday. When Shihyeon says that he doesn't, Hajun then tells him that he's planning on taking a break, as per advised. After the call ended, Shihyeon reflects on the fact that Hajun is being more affectionate now, even offering to make him lunch. Although it's true that Hajun is already making his breakfast every day, lunch is a different story. Just then, Shihyeon notices Hajun walking outside through the window. He tries to wave at him after he saw him looking his way. Their eyes meet, but Hajun quickly looks away. Shihyeon got annoyed at such rudeness, but then realizes that Hajun only did that because a fellow professor had approached him, and therefore felt silly for getting upset. Anyway, Hajun eventually waves back, but this time, for some reason, Shihyeon chose to hide. As Hajun wonders if he waved back too late, Shihyeon wonders why he hid in the first place. After all, Hajun is just waving back like normal. When Shihyeon stands back up, Hajun was already gone. He then just looks at the place where Hajun used to be with such a longing expression on his face. That aside, going back once again to the scene in the beginning of this chapter, the crying kid suddenly gets off the bench and starts to run. He eventually turned back when little Hajun calls out to him to ask for his name. And just like that, we find out that the kid was in fact little Shihyeon himself.